Right now, China and Russia's economic partnership is worth more than $700 billion. That's more than the size of most entire countries' economies. Think about it. This is not just a trade deal. It's a shift in global power. So here's the question. Is this alliance a real threat to Western dominance? Or is it just two isolated countries clinging to each other out of necessity? This isn't just about moving goods back and forth. We're talking about energy megadeals, cutting-edge tech partnerships, and a joint effort to build a new global trading system, one that could leave the West behind. Together, they're building pipelines, developing AI, and even creating financial systems that don't need the US dollar. And if they succeed, the global balance of power might tilt, away from Washington and toward a new axis stretching from Moscow to Beijing. But how did we get here? Let's go back in time for a minute. Not long ago, the idea of China and Russia working closely together would have sounded impossible. Back in the 1960s, they were bitter enemies. Both were communist, yes, but that didn't stop them from clashing over borders, ideology, and even the leadership of the global communist movement. It was called the Sino-Soviet split, and for decades, it kept them apart. Fast forward to today, and something has completely changed. The real turning point came in 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea. The West responded with heavy sanctions, cutting Russia off from many global markets. Then came 2022, with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, bringing even tougher sanctions. Suddenly, Russia needed new friends, and China was watching closely. At the same time, China was facing its own pressure. The US-China trade war had begun. Tariffs were flying. Tech companies were getting blacklisted. Trust was eroding fast. So, two global powers, one frozen out of the West, the other increasingly pushed back by it, found common ground. As Russian President Vladimir Putin said, President Xi is a dear friend, but is this friendship built on true trust or just mutual survival? One thing is clear. When the West closed its doors, China and Russia opened theirs to each other. And what they've built together since then is truly massive. Now let's break down exactly what this $700 billion partnership is built on. It's not just some loose handshake. It's a carefully crafted economic blueprint designed to challenge Western influence. And at the core of this plan are three key pillars: energy, infrastructure, and technology. First up, energy. Russia is sitting on some of the largest oil and gas reserves in the world, and China is desperate for energy to power its massive economy. So, they've formed an energy superhighway. Russia now sends huge amounts of oil and natural gas to China through pipelines like the Power of Siberia. In fact, China is set to become Russia's largest energy customer. This isn't just a business deal, it's a lifeline for both nations. Next, we have infrastructure. China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative is all about building trade routes across Asia, Europe, and Africa. But now, Russia is stepping in to help make that a reality. The two countries are combining China's Belt and Road with Russia's strategic Arctic shipping routes. This means China can access new trade routes to Europe and beyond, cutting out Western-controlled shipping lanes. Finally, there's technology. The tech world is where things get especially interesting. With the West cutting Russia off from global markets, Russia has turned to China for help in creating new tech solutions. China's tech giants like Huawei are stepping in to replace Western brands like Apple in Russia. Meanwhile, both nations are teaming up to create semiconductors and artificial intelligence technologies. They're even finding ways to bypass Western sanctions using alternative payment systems and CIPs, China's international payment system. In short, they're not just doing business. They're building a new economic system, a system designed to bypass the West and reshape global trade. As China and Russia's alliance grows stronger, the West has been scrambling to stop it. Sanctions are the tool of choice for Western powers, particularly the United States and the European Union. Their goal? To isolate Russia and cut China's access to critical technologies, especially semiconductors, which are essential for everything from smartphones to military tech. But here's the catch. These sanctions aren't having the desired effect. In fact, they might be backfiring. Take Russia's trade with China, for example. Despite being under severe sanctions, Russia's trade with China has surged by 60% in just 5 years. How? The key lies in China's yuan. As the US dollar becomes more unreliable for both countries, China and Russia have increasingly turned to the yuan and the ruble for trade, cutting the dollar out of the equation entirely. This is a huge shift because for decades, the US dollar has been the dominant currency for international trade, but now Russia and China are creating their own economic space. Even though the West keeps trying to isolate them, these two nations have found ways around it. The yuan is slowly replacing the dollar in many Russian transactions, and Chinese companies are stepping in to provide Russia with the tech and goods it needs. Russia may have been cut off from Western markets, but with China's help, it's finding new ways to thrive. This leads us to the big question: can sanctions really stop this alliance? Or have they just pushed China and Russia closer together, making their partnership even stronger? Let's look at how this no-limits partnership is playing out in the real world. One of the most striking examples is the Arctic LNG Project. Here's how it works. Russia has some of the world's largest natural gas reserves, particularly in the Arctic. China has deep pockets and a major interest in securing long-term energy supplies. So, China is helping fund Russia's gas extraction and transportation infrastructure in exchange for a steady supply of gas. This deal isn't just about energy, it's a major geopolitical play. By funding the extraction of gas in the Arctic, China is locking down a long-term energy source while simultaneously securing more influence in the region. Another critical development is the China-Russia SWIFT alternative, which is essentially a way for both nations to bypass Western financial systems. The SWIFT system has been the backbone of international payments for decades, and it's controlled by Western powers. But with increasing sanctions and a desire for independence, Russia and China have created their own payment system, CIPS, China International Payment System, and Russia's own system, SPFS. What does this mean? It's a direct challenge to the US dollar. By using their own payment systems, China and Russia can conduct transactions without relying on the West. This is a huge blow to the dollar's dominance in global trade, and it's a major step toward the kind of economic sovereignty both countries are seeking. These projects are a clear signal that China and Russia are building an economic and financial system that doesn't just resist Western pressure. They're actively replacing it. While the China-Russia alliance seems unbreakable on the surface, there are some cracks starting to show. First, there's the issue of Russia's reliance on China. For all of Russia's oil and gas, its technological know-how, and its military might, it's China that's really driving the bus. The sheer size of China's economy gives it leverage over Russia in many ways. Russia is essentially becoming the junior partner in this relationship. While Russia supplies the energy, China controls the tech and is the bigger player in global trade. This dynamic could create frustration for Russia, especially if it starts feeling like it has little room to maneuver. On the other side, China is playing a careful game. While it benefits from Russia's resources and strategic partnership, it also needs to avoid attracting more secondary sanctions, the penalties that could come from the West if China gets too cozy with Russia. After all, China's economy is deeply intertwined with the West, and too much support for Russia could push China into the same isolation that Russia faces. So China is balancing this partnership carefully, making sure it doesn't go too far in ways that could hurt its own global interests. Both nations need each other, but for very different reasons. Putin needs China to stay afloat amidst Western sanctions, while Xi needs Russia to maintain a strategic foothold in Eurasia. But both sides are walking a tightrope. As one analyst put it, Xi needs Europe's market, and Putin has no other options. Their bond is strong, but it's fragile, and it could snap if either side feels like they're giving more than they're getting. So, what does all of this mean for the world? Well, it's no exaggeration to say that the China-Russia partnership is starting to reshape the global balance of power. Together, they're creating an economic bloc that challenges the Group of Seven, the group of the world's most advanced economies. Let's break down the potential ripple effects. First off, consider the Eurasian economic bloc that China and Russia are building. With China's Belt and Road Initiative reaching into Europe and Russia's energy exports flowing east, the two are creating a unified zone of influence stretching from Asia to Europe. If more countries join this bloc, it could become a true alternative to the Western-led system. Countries that feel left out of the current economic order could flock to this new alliance, looking for trade deals that don't require them to follow Western rules. The rise of alternative payment systems like CIPS and SPFS is a direct challenge to the dominance of the petrodollar, the system that has tied global oil transactions to the US dollar for decades. As China and Russia conduct more trade in yuan and rubles, the global reliance on the US dollar will likely decrease. This could have major consequences, not just for the dollar, but for how countries manage their reserves and trade. The petrodollar system has allowed the U.S. to maintain a unique level of global influence, but this growing shift towards local currencies could weaken that power over time. One of the most powerful ways China and Russia are expanding their influence is through infrastructure projects. As they build pipelines, roads, railways, and ports, they're also creating a physical network that reaches deep into Europe, the Middle East, and even Africa. This economic belt is a direct challenge to the Western-led trade routes and infrastructure projects. It's almost like a geopolitical chessboard, with China and Russia placing their pieces in strategic locations to weaken the West's position. So, where does all this leave us? The China-Russia alliance is not just about energy deals or trade partnerships. It's about reshaping the global order. This is a high-stakes game of economic and geopolitical chess, where the players are not just two nations, but the very framework of how the world does business. The reality is this alliance could challenge the West's dominance in ways we haven't seen in decades. If China and Russia succeed in creating a more multipolar world, one where power is shared more equally between several superpowers, then we could see a dramatic shift in how countries interact with one another. For you, as a global citizen, this shift could mean big changes in everything from prices at the gas pump to global political tensions. As the world becomes more interconnected and influenced by China and Russia, the decisions made by these two countries could affect your daily life in ways we can't entirely predict just yet. Will the US and its allies adapt to this new world, or will they push back harder, further escalating the tensions? And could this be the beginning of a new global order where Eurasia, led by China and Russia, emerges as the dominant force? The next decade could belong to Eurasia, or it could see the West pushing back and trying to reassert its control. The stakes are high, and the outcome will likely shape our world in profound ways. But here's the big question. What does all of this mean for you? As the global order shifts, it's important to stay informed and ask questions. How will these changes impact your country? Will you see your own nation become part of this new economic bloc, or will it stand firmly with the West? These are questions that will affect not just policymakers, but all of us, whether we realize it or not. So, let's discuss it below. What do you think? Will the West adapt, or will the next decade belong to Eurasia? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives into geopolitics, global trade, and what's shaping our world today.